The night we started like any other. My best friend Mia and I had settled in for a relaxed evening at our apartment. We had a stash of our favorite snacks, a few good movies lined up, and a joint we planned to share. It was our little escape from the stresses of daily life, a chance to unwind and enjoy each other's company. As the night wore on, we smoked, laughed, and lost ourselves in the latest comedy flick. The weed had done its job, and we both felt blissfully detached from reality. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, a sharp, metallic screech sliced through our laughter. It was so loud and unexpected that it felt like a physical jolt, yanking us out of our relaxed state. We froze, staring at each other with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the movie's muted background noise. "Yeah," I replied, my heart starting to race. "What the hell was that?" Before either of us could move, another sound followed. This time, it was a distinct honk, like an old bicycle horn, echoing eerily through the stillness of the night. Mia and I exchanged worried glances. The sounds were coming from the hallway outside our apartment. A creeping sense of unease settled over us, and the comforting haze of the weed began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of dread. "We should check it out," Mia said, her voice trembling slightly. Reluctantly, I agreed. We got up, our movements slow and cautious, as if sudden gestures might provoke whatever was out there. We crept towards the front door, each step amplifying the pounding of my heart in my chest. When we reached the door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I was sure I had locked it earlier. I exchanged a panicked look with Mia, and we silently decided to close it as quietly as possible. As I carefully pushed the door, trying to minimize the noise, the old hinges betrayed us with a loud, creaking sound. My breath caught in my throat, and I held still, listening intently. Then from the staircase we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. "Someone's coming," Mia hissed, her face pale. I pushed the door shut just as the footsteps reached our floor. I turned the lock, my hands shaking, and pressed my ear against the door. The footsteps stopped right outside, and for a moment, I could almost hear my heartbeat in the deafening silence. Mia and I backed away from the door, retreating to the relative safety of the living room. We sat on the couch, our nerves on edge, waiting for the next sound, but none came. The footsteps didn't resume, and the strange noises stopped. The minutes dragged by, and slowly, the tension began to ease. We whispered our theories to each other, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maybe it was a prank, or someone had the wrong apartment, but the feeling of danger lingered, like a dark cloud over our heads. The rest of the night, we stayed on high alert, every creak and rustle making us jump. By the time dawn broke, we were exhausted, but relieved to see the light of day. We cautiously opened the door to find the hallway empty, with no sign of an intruder. The incident left a mark on us, a reminder of how quickly things can go from ordinary to terrifying. From that night on, we were more vigilant, always double-checking the locks and listening for any unusual sounds. The sense of safety we had taken for granted was gone, replaced by a lingering edge of fear. The morning after the unsettling noises, Mia and I could hardly shake off the eerie feeling that had settled over us. We went about our usual routine, but the memory of the night before lingered like a dark cloud. We were both on edge, hyper-aware of every little sound and movement around us. As I made breakfast, the clinking of utensils and the hum of the fridge felt unnaturally loud in the otherwise silent apartment. Mia sat at the kitchen table, her eyes darting to the front door every few seconds. "Do you think we should call the police?" she asked, her voice breaking the uneasy silence. I paused, considering. "I'm not sure. We didn't see anyone, and there was no sign of forced entry. They might just brush it off as paranoia." "Maybe," Mia replied, sighing, "but I can't shake the feeling that something was out there." We decided to let it go for now and focus on our day. I had classes to attend, and Mia had a shift at the coffee shop. We left the apartment, double-checking that the door was securely locked behind us. Throughout the day, I couldn't concentrate on my lectures. My mind kept drifting back to the noises and the footsteps. I replayed the events in my head, searching for any detail that might explain what had happened. By the time my classes were over, I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. When I returned home, I found Mia already there, curled up on the couch with a textbook in her lap. She looked up as I entered, giving me a weak smile. "Hey, how was your day?" "Long," I admitted, dropping my bag by the door. I couldn't stop thinking about last night. "Me neither," Mia confessed. "Every time the door opened at the cafe, I jumped. I even asked my manager if we could check the security cameras, but there was nothing unusual." We spent the evening trying to distract ourselves with movies and conversation, but the tension between us was palpable. Now and then, one of us would glance at the front door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, we heard it again. The same metallic screech, followed by the haunting honk of an old bicycle horn. My blood ran cold, and I saw the same fear mirrored in Mia's eyes. "We need to check the door," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mia nodded, her face pale. We crept towards the front door, the floorboards creaking under our feet. This time, we were determined to get a look at whatever, or whoever, was causing the noises. I reached for the doorknob, turning it as quietly as possible. Just as I started to pull the door open, the footsteps began again. They were slower this time, almost hesitant. I peeked through the crack in the door, but the hallway was empty. "Mia, there's no one there," I whispered, confused. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped, and a cold draft swept through the crack in the door, chilling me to the bone. I quickly shut the door, locking it with trembling hands. We backed away from the door, our hearts pounding. The apartment felt suffocating, the walls closing in around us. We retreated to the living room, huddling together on the couch. "What is going on?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "This isn't just in our heads, right?" "No, it's real," I replied, trying to steady my breathing. "We need to figure out what's happening." We spent the rest of the night wide awake, listening for any other strange sounds, but the apartment remained silent, save for the occasional creak of the old building settling. As dawn approached, we decided to take action. We would talk to our neighbors, check the building's security, and find out if anyone else had experienced anything similar. We couldn't live in fear forever. The next morning, we started our investigation. We knocked on doors, asking our neighbors if they had heard or seen anything unusual. Most of them shook their heads, offering sympathetic but puzzled looks. A few mentioned the building's history, how it was old and prone to making strange noises, but nothing as specific as what we had described. Frustrated but determined, we headed to the building manager's office. Mrs. Thompson, a kindly elderly woman, listened to our story with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry you girls are scared," she said, her voice soothing. "This building is old, and it does make noises, but what you're describing is unusual. I'll check the security footage and see if anything shows up." We thanked her and returned to our apartment, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. We had taken the first steps to finding answers, but the sense of unease lingered. That night, as we settled in once more, we couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there, watching us. We double-checked the locks and kept our phones within reach, ready to call for help if needed. The strange noises hadn't just disturbed our peace, they had shattered our sense of safety. And until we found out what was behind them, we knew we wouldn't truly feel secure again. The following day dawned with a heavy sense of unease hanging over us. Mia and I had slept fitfully, the memory of the previous night's noises replaying in our minds. Despite our exhaustion, we were determined to find out what was happening in our building. We started our day with a visit to Mrs. Thompson's office to follow up on the security footage. When we arrived, she greeted us with a concerned smile and beckoned us inside. "Good morning, girls. I checked the footage as I promised," she said, gesturing for us to sit down. "But there's nothing unusual. No one entered or left your floor during the times you mentioned." Mia and I exchanged worried glances. "Nothing at all?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Nothing," Mrs. Thompson confirmed, her brow furrowing. I'm not sure what to make of it. The cameras didn't catch any movement in the hallway. The lack of evidence was both frustrating and unsettling. If there was no one outside, then what was making those noises? We thanked Mrs. Thompson for her help and left her office, feeling more confused than ever. Back in our apartment, Mia and I tried to come up with a plan. We needed to understand what was happening, and if the security footage didn't show anything, we had to consider other possibilities. "We should talk to more of our neighbors," Mia suggested. "Maybe someone knows something, or has experienced similar things. I agreed, and we spent the next few hours knocking on doors and asking questions. Most of our neighbors were friendly and sympathetic, but none of them had heard or seen anything unusual. A few mentioned the building's age and its tendency to make strange noises, but no one had experienced anything as specific as what we described. Feeling discouraged, we returned to our apartment. The sense of isolation and vulnerability was growing stronger. We were desperate for answers, but every lead seemed to go nowhere. That night, as we tried to distract ourselves with a movie, the tension between us was palpable. We were both on edge, jumping at every little sound. The memory of the footsteps and the metallic screech haunted us, making it impossible to relax. Just as we were beginning to think that maybe we had imagined the whole thing, the noise came again, the same metallic screech, followed by the eerie honk of an old bicycle horn. Our hearts raced and we exchanged panicked glances. "We need to figure this out," I whispered, my voice shaking. "We can't keep living like this." Mia nodded, her face pale. "Let's check the door again." We crept towards the front door, our nerves frayed. This time we decided to open it quickly, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever or whoever was making the noises. I took a deep breath and flung the door open. The hallway was empty. We stepped out cautiously, peering down the corridor. There was no sign of anyone or anything unusual. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's electrical system. "This is getting ridiculous," Mia muttered, frustration evident in her voice. "There's nothing here." As we stood in the hallway, a sudden draft of cold air swept past us, sending chills down my spine. I turned to look at Mia, but she seemed to have felt it too. The air was still, but the sense of being watched was almost palpable. "Let's go back inside," I said, my voice tight with fear. "We need to think of another plan." We retreated to the safety of our apartment, locking the door behind us. Our minds raced with possibilities. Could it be a prank? Or maybe something supernatural? We had no answers, only more questions. That night, sleep was elusive. Every creak and rustle in the building seemed amplified, keeping us on edge. The fear of the unknown was overwhelming, making it impossible to relax. The next morning, we decided to take a different approach. We needed more information about the building itself. We spent hours researching online, trying to find anything that might explain the strange occurrences. We scoured forums, news articles, and historical records, hoping to uncover some hidden secrets. Eventually, we stumbled upon an old news article about the building. It mentioned that the structure had been around for over a century and had undergone several renovations. There were rumors of unexplained events and ghostly sightings, but nothing concrete. "Do you think it could be haunted?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, feeling a mix of skepticism and fear. "But we need to consider all possibilities." We decided to reach out to a local paranormal investigation group. It felt like a long shot, but we were desperate for answers. We sent them an email, detailing our experiences and asking for their help. While we waited for a response, we continued our research and kept a close eye on our surroundings. The sense of unease lingered, but we were determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. We couldn't let fear control our lives. As the days passed, we became more vigilant, always listening for strange noises and keeping our phones within reach. The fear of the unknown was still there, but we were taking steps to confront it. The paranormal investigation team eventually responded, agreeing to visit our apartment and conduct an investigation. They were intrigued by our story and wanted to help us find answers. The night of the investigation arrived, and Mia and I were both anxious and hopeful. The team set up their equipment, explaining how they would conduct their investigation. We watched nervously as they worked, hoping for some clarity. Hours passed, and the team captured some strange noises and fluctuations in their equipment, but nothing definitive. They promised to review their findings and get back to us. As the team packed up and left, Mia and I felt a mix of relief and frustration. We had taken steps to find answers, but the mystery was still unsolved. That night, as we settled into bed, the sense of unease was still there, but we felt a glimmer of hope. We were not alone in this. We had people willing to help us, and we were determined to find the truth. Whatever was happening in our apartment, we would face it together. The fear of the unknown was powerful, but our determination to uncover the mystery was even stronger. The following day dawned grey and somber, mirroring our moods. The investigation team had left us with more questions than answers, and Mia and I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on us. We decided to take matters into our own hands, determined to uncover the truth behind the strange noises and eerie sensations. After a quick breakfast, we grabbed our phones and notebooks, ready to document anything that might shed light on the situation. Our first stop was Mrs. Thompson's office. We wanted to check if there had been any updates or new information since our last visit. Mrs. Thompson welcomed us with a concerned expression. "Good morning, girls. How are you holding up?" "We're managing," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Have you heard anything unusual or received any reports from other tenants?" She shook her head. "No, I'm afraid not. I did review the security footage again, but there's still nothing out of the ordinary. I wish I could be more helpful." We thanked her and left the office, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. We decided to knock on a few more doors, hoping someone might have noticed something they hadn't mentioned before. We started with the apartment directly below ours, where an elderly woman named Mrs. Garcia lived. She welcomed us in, offering us tea and cookies as we explained our predicament. "I'm so sorry to hear you girls are having trouble," she said, her kind eyes filled with concern. "I haven't heard any strange noises myself, but this building does have a history." "What do you mean?" Mia asked, leaning forward with interest. "Well, this place is over a century old," Mrs. Garcia explained. "There have been stories over the years, rumors of hauntings, unexplained events. I never paid them much mind, but who knows?" We thanked her for the information and continued our search. We spoke to several other neighbors, but none had any concrete answers. Some had heard the rumors of hauntings, while others simply shrugged and suggested the building's age was to blame. Feeling discouraged, we returned to our apartment. We sat down at the kitchen table, surrounded by our notes and a sense of unease. "What now?" Mia asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "We keep looking," I said firmly. "There has to be an explanation. Maybe we're missing something." We decided to focus our efforts on the building's history. We spent hours poring over old newspaper articles, historical records, and online forums. We discovered that the building had once been a hotel in the early 1900s, before being converted into apartments in the 1970s. There were vague mentions of a fire that had occurred in the hotel, but details were scarce. As evening fell, we took a break and ordered some takeout. While we waited for the food to arrive, we discussed our next steps. "We should try to find out more about that fire," Mia suggested. "Maybe it's connected to what's happening now." "I agree," I said. "We could visit the local library or historical society. They might have more detailed records." Just as we were finishing our meal, we heard it again, the metallic screech and the eerie honk of the bicycle horn. Our hearts raced as we exchanged worried glances. "We need to see what's out there," I said, my voice shaking. "This time, let's try to catch whoever it is." Mia nodded, her face pale but determined. We grabbed our phones and cautiously approached the front door. I took a deep breath and flung the door open, ready to confront whatever lay beyond. The hallway was empty, but the cold draft of air hit us immediately. We stepped out, our senses on high alert. The hallway was dimly lit, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Do you hear that?" Mia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I strained my ears and heard a faint rhythmic tapping coming from the end of the hallway. We moved towards the sound, our footsteps echoing on the wooden floorboards. The tapping grew louder, more distinct, and my heart pounded in my chest. We reached the end of the hallway and turned the corner. There, in the dim light, we saw it, a rusty old bicycle leaning against the wall. Its wheels were spinning slowly, the source of the metallic screech and the eerie honk. "What the?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. I reached out to touch the bicycle, but as my fingers brushed the handlebars, the wheels came to a sudden stop. The air around us grew colder, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now." We backed away from the bicycle, our eyes never leaving it. We returned to our apartment and locked the door behind us, our hearts still racing. "What just happened?" Mia asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I replied, trying to steady my breathing, "but I think we just found a clue." The discovery of the old bicycle raised more questions than answers, but it also gave us a new lead to follow. We decided to investigate further, determined to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences. That night, We stayed up late, researching the history of the building and the mysterious bicycle. We found a few mentions of a young boy who had died in the fire and the description of his favorite toy, a bicycle that matched the one we had seen. As we pieced together the fragments of the past, a chilling realization began to take shape. The strange noises, the cold drafts, the eerie presence, it all pointed to a haunting connected to the tragic events of the fire. We knew our investigation was far from over, but we felt a renewed sense of determination. We would uncover the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. The spirit of the past was reaching out to us, and we were determined to listen. The discovery of the old bicycle had given us a new sense of purpose. Mia and I were determined to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences in our building. We spent the next few days diving deeper into the history of the fire and the boy who had perished in it. Our first stop was the local library, a stately building that seemed to hold the weight of history within its walls. We made our way to the archives, where a friendly librarian named Miss Parker guided us to the section on local history. We pored over old newspapers and historical documents, our eyes scanning the yellowed pages for any mention of the fire. Finally, we found it, a headline from 1921, "Tragic Fire Claims Lives at Crescent Hotel." The article detailed the blaze that had engulfed the building, then a bustling hotel. Several guests and staff members had died in the fire, including a young boy named Thomas Baker. Thomas's story struck a chord with us. According to the article, he had been an adventurous child, always seen riding his bicycle around the hotel grounds. His parents were hotel staff, and they had perished in the fire alongside him. The article mentioned that Thomas's bicycle had been found near the spot where he died, its wheels melted and twisted by the flames. Mia and I exchanged a somber look. "Do you think it's his spirit?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It seems likely," I replied, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. "We need to find a way to help him." Our next step was to visit the local historical society. We hoped they might have more information about the fire and any lingering spirits associated with the building. The society's office was a small, unassuming building, but inside it was filled with artifacts and records from the town's past. We spoke with Mr. Harris, the society's curator, who listened intently to our story. He nodded thoughtfully when we mentioned the bicycle and the cold drafts. "The Crescent Hotel fire is a well-known tragedy in our town's history," he said. "Many believe that spirits of those who perished still linger. Thomas Baker is one of the most talked-about spirits. People have reported seeing a young boy riding a bicycle or hearing the sound of its bell late at night." "What can we do to help him?" Mia asked, her eyes filled with empathy. Mr. Harris sighed. "Spirits often remain because they have unfinished business or are unable to move on. In Thomas's case, it could be his attachment to the bicycle or the trauma of the fire. Sometimes, acknowledging their presence and offering closure can help." Armed with this new information, we returned to our apartment. We decided to hold a small ceremony to acknowledge Thomas's spirit and offer him peace. We hoped that by doing so, we might help him move on and end the disturbances we had been experiencing. That night, we gathered a few items, a small candle, a piece of paper, and a pen. We wrote a letter to Thomas, expressing our sympathy for what had happened to him and his family. We promised to take care of his bicycle and asked for his forgiveness if we had disturbed him. We placed the letter near the old bicycle, which we had brought into our apartment for the ceremony. We lit the candle and stood in silence, hoping that our gesture would reach Thomas's spirit. As the candle flickered, a strange calmness settled over the room. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in days, we felt a sense of peace. We stayed there for a while, just absorbing the quiet and hoping that our message had been received. The next morning, we woke up feeling more rested than we had in a long time. There were no strange noises during the night, no cold drafts or eerie sensations. It was as if a weight had been lifted from the apartment. Mia and I shared a hopeful look. "Do you think it worked?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "I hope so," I replied. "But we should remain vigilant. If Thomas's spirit is still here, we'll need to continue helping him." Over the next few days, the atmosphere in our apartment remained peaceful. We continued our research, learning more about the history of the building and its former occupants. We wanted to be prepared in case any other spirits needed our help. We also made a point of visiting Thomas's memorial, a small plaque in a nearby park dedicated to the victims of the Crescent Hotel fire. We left flowers and said a few words, hoping to honor his memory. Our lives slowly returned to normal, but we never forgot what we had experienced. The sense of unease that had gripped us was gone, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the history of our home and the spirits that might still linger. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, we heard a faint, familiar sound, the honk of a bicycle horn. It wasn't eerie or frightening this time. It felt like a gentle reminder. Mia and I exchanged smiles. We knew that Thomas was still with us in some way, but we felt at peace knowing that we had done what we could to help him. Our apartment was no longer just a place to live. It was a place where history and the present coexisted, where we had learned to embrace the unknown and find comfort in the connections we had made. Despite the brief period of peace, the tranquility didn't last long. A few nights after our ceremony, the unsettling sounds returned. The metallic screech, the bicycle horn, and the cold drafts haunted us once more. It was clear that our initial efforts hadn't fully resolved whatever was happening. Determined not to give up, Mia and I decided to take a more direct approach. If Thomas's spirit was still restless, we needed to understand why and find a way to help him move on. We contacted Mr. Harris at the Historical Society again, asking for any additional information or advice. Mr. Harris suggested that we conduct a more thorough investigation of the building itself. He believed that there might be physical remnants of the past that were keeping Thomas tethered to our apartment. Armed with this new direction, we planned a detailed exploration of the building. One Saturday afternoon, we set out to explore every nook and cranny of the old structure. We started in the basement, a dark and musty space filled with forgotten items and cobwebs. As we moved through the dimly lit corridors, we felt an oppressive weight in the air, as if the building itself was watching us. In a dusty corner, we found an old maintenance room. Inside, among the rusty tools and broken furniture, we discovered a small weathered box. We opened it to find a collection of items that seemed out of place: old photographs, letters, and a child's toy car. "These must have belonged to someone from the hotel days," Mia said, her voice tinged with excitement and sadness. "Maybe even Thomas." We carefully examined the contents of the box. One photograph in particular caught our attention. It showed a young boy with a wide smile holding a bicycle. Written on the back was a name: Thomas Baker. My heart ached as I looked at the photo. "This must be him," I said softly. "We need to bring these items to our apartment. Maybe they'll help us connect with Thomas's spirit." We carried the box upstairs, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Once back in our apartment, we laid the items out on the kitchen table, hoping to understand their significance. We decided to hold another ceremony, this time with these personal artifacts. That night, we lit a candle and placed the photographs and letters around it. We spoke to Thomas, telling him that we had found his belongings and wanted to help him find peace. We asked him to show us what he needed to move on. As the candle flickered, we felt a sudden chill in the air. The room grew colder, and a soft, whispering sound filled the space. It was as if Thomas was trying to communicate with us. "Do you hear that?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, straining to make out the whispers. They were faint but unmistakable, like the distant echoes of a child's voice. We closed our eyes and focused, trying to understand the message. In my mind, I saw flashes of images, flames, smoke, a small boy crying for help. I felt his fear and confusion, his desperate need to escape. It was overwhelming, but I knew we had to endure it to help him. "He's showing us the fire," I said, my voice shaking. He's still trapped in that moment, unable to move on. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes. We need to help him realize that it's over, that he's safe now. We continued to speak to Thomas, reassuring him that the fire was long past and that he could let go of the fear and pain. We promised to honor his memory and take care of his belongings. Slowly, the whispers faded and the room grew warmer. The sense of unease lifted, replaced by a feeling of calm. We felt a presence, warm and comforting, as if Thomas was finally at peace. The next morning, We woke up feeling more rested and hopeful than we had in a long time. The strange noises and cold drafts were gone, and our apartment felt lighter. We knew that our efforts had made a difference. We decided to create a small memorial for Thomas in our apartment, a place where we could honor his memory and keep his spirit alive. We framed the photograph of him with his bicycle and placed it on a shelf along with the other items we had found. As we stood in front of the memorial, Mia took my hand. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with relief and gratitude. "We helped him." I nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment and peace. "We did, and we'll always remember him." Our lives gradually returned to normal, but we never forgot the experiences we had shared and the bond we had formed with Thomas's spirit. We had faced our fears and uncovered the truth, bringing closure to a long-forgotten tragedy. The sense of danger and uncertainty had given way to a deeper understanding of the past and a greater appreciation for the present. We knew that our journey wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about connecting with the history of our home and finding peace in the process. And so, we moved forward, grateful for the lessons we had learned and the strength we had found in each other. Our apartment was no longer just a place to live. It was a place where the past and present coexisted, where memories and spirits lingered, and where we had found a sense of belonging and peace. The peace we had found after helping Thomas didn't last. For a few weeks, our apartment remained calm, and we believed that the spirit of Thomas Baker had finally found rest. However, the eerie noises and cold drafts began to creep back, slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. It started one night when Mia and I were watching a movie. Just as the plot reached a tense moment, we heard the unmistakable metallic screech and the honk of a bicycle horn. Our hearts sank. We had been so sure that we had helped Thomas move on. "We need to figure out what's happening," Mia said, her voice tinged with frustration and fear. I nodded in agreement. "There's something we're missing. We need to dig deeper." Determined to get to the bottom of this, we decided to revisit the Historical Society. Mr. Harris welcomed us back with a knowing look. "I had a feeling I'd see you two again," he said. "The spirits in that building are persistent." "We thought we helped Thomas find peace, but the disturbances have started again," I explained. "Is there something else we should be looking for?" Mr. Harris nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes, spirits are connected to more than just a single event or location. There may be other spirits in the building that are still restless." We spent the rest of the afternoon at the Historical Society, combing through old records and documents. We discovered that the Crescent Hotel had been the site of several tragic events over the years, not just the fire that claimed Thomas's life. There had been a series of accidents, unexplained deaths, and even rumors of a murder. "This place has a dark history," Mia said, shivering as she read through a particularly gruesome newspaper article. "No wonder there are so many restless spirits." We returned to our apartment with a new sense of urgency. If there were multiple spirits trapped in the building, we needed to find a way to help them all. We decided to conduct a more thorough investigation of the entire building, starting with the areas we hadn't explored yet. That night, we ventured into the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with old furniture and broken antiques. As we searched through the clutter, we found more items that seemed to be connected to the hotel's past. A broken mirror, an old suitcase, and a collection of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. One letter in particular caught our attention. It was addressed to a woman named Margaret, and it spoke of a love affair gone wrong, ending in tragedy. The writer, a man named Edward, expressed his sorrow and regret over an incident that had taken place in the hotel. "This could be another clue," I said, showing the letter to Mia. "Maybe Edward and Margaret are among the spirits still trapped here." We decided to hold another ceremony, this time addressing all the spirits that might be lingering in the building. We gathered the items we had found and set them up in our living room, creating a makeshift altar. We lit candles and spoke to the spirits, asking them to find peace and move on from the physical world. As we spoke, the air grew colder, and we felt a presence in the room. It was stronger than before, more insistent. We heard faint whispers and felt a chill run down our spines. It was as if the spirits were trying to communicate with us, but we couldn't understand their message. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Mia's hand. "We need to get out of here," I whispered. We stumbled through the dark apartment, our hearts pounding. Just as we reached the door, we heard a loud crash behind us. We turned to see the old suitcase we had found in the attic had fallen off the altar, its contents spilling onto the floor. In the dim light from the hallway, we saw something that made our blood run cold. Among the items from the suitcase was a small, ornate box. It was locked, and it seemed to radiate a sense of malevolence. "We need to open it," Mia said, her voice trembling. "There's something inside that box that's important." With shaking hands, we pried the box open. Inside, we found a collection of old photographs and a diary. The photographs showed various people who had stayed at the Crescent Hotel over the years, including a few who looked familiar from our research. The diary belonged to Margaret, the woman from the letters we had found. As we read through the diary, we uncovered a story of love, betrayal, and murder. Margaret had been involved in a forbidden romance with Edward, a guest at the hotel. When their affair was discovered, Edward was killed in a fit of rage by Margaret's jealous husband. The diary ended with Margaret's vow to seek revenge, her spirit forever tied to the place of her suffering. "This explains so much," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There are multiple spirits here, all connected by the tragic events at the hotel." We realized that our initial efforts to help Thomas had only scratched the surface. We needed to address all the spirits trapped in the building and find a way to bring them peace. The next day, we returned to the Historical Society with the diary and photographs. Mr. Harris was astounded by our findings and agreed to help us create a plan to cleanse the building of its restless spirits. Together, we organized a ceremony that involved the entire community. Residents of the building and local historians gathered to acknowledge the past and offer closure to the spirits. We read aloud from Margaret's diary, shared the stories of those who had perished, and held a moment of silence for the victims. As we conducted the ceremony, the atmosphere in the building began to change. The air grew warmer, and the sense of unease that had plagued us for so long began to lift. It was as if the spirits were finally finding the peace they had been denied for so many years. That night, Mia and I returned to our apartment, feeling a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. The strange noises and cold drafts were gone, replaced by a comforting silence. "We did it," Mia said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We helped them all." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. We did, and we'll always remember what we've learned. Our apartment had become more than just a place to live. It was a testament to the power of understanding and compassion. We had faced our fears, uncovered the truth, and brought peace to the spirits of the past. And in doing so, we found a sense of peace and belonging that would stay with us forever. Despite the intense ceremony and the collective effort of the community to bring peace to the spirits of the Crescent Hotel, Mia and I were once again thrown into the depths of unease. Just as we began to feel that our lives could return to normal, the disturbances returned, now more intense and frequent. The metallic screeches, the cold drafts, and the eerie bicycle horn haunted us relentlessly. It felt as if the spirits were crying out in desperation. One particularly harrowing night, I awoke to the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. Mia lay beside me, her eyes wide open, reflecting the same fear I felt. We heard whispers again, but this time they were clearer, almost forming coherent words. "We can't ignore this," Mia said, her voice shaking. "There's something more they need from us." I nodded in agreement, though the fear in my chest was almost paralyzing. "We need to understand what they're trying to say." The next day, we decided to reach out to a professional medium. Her name was Evelyn, an experienced spiritualist known for helping spirits find peace. When she arrived at our apartment, she immediately sensed the unrest. Her face grew solemn as she took in the environment. "There are many spirits here," she said. "Their energy is strong and filled with unresolved anguish." We spent hours with Evelyn, who conducted a thorough spiritual investigation of our apartment and the building. She communicated with the spirits, trying to understand their needs and the source of their unrest. Her insights were invaluable. "There's one spirit that stands out," Evelyn said after a long session. "A young boy named Thomas. His energy is the strongest, but he's not alone. He's connected to the other spirits, and they're all tied to a single event that binds them here." We realized that while we had tried to help individual spirits, we hadn't addressed the collective trauma they shared. The fire at the Crescent Hotel had created a powerful bond between them. and this connection was what kept them from moving on. Evelyn suggested a final, more comprehensive ceremony, a ritual that would acknowledge the collective trauma and help all the spirits find peace together. She believed that by addressing the event that united them in death, we could finally set them free. That night, we prepared for the ceremony. Evelyn guided us, instructing us to gather personal items of the spirits, candles, and offerings of flowers and incense. We invited Mr. Harris and a few residents who had been affected by the disturbances to join us. Together, we formed a circle in the middle of our living room, each holding an item connected to the spirits. Evelyn began the ritual by lighting the candles and incense, creating a calming atmosphere. She spoke softly, calling out to the spirits by name, acknowledging their pain and the tragedy they had endured. As she did, the room grew colder, and we felt a presence envelop us, a mixture of sadness and hope. "We are here to honor you," Evelyn said, her voice steady and compassionate. "We acknowledge the suffering you have experienced, and we offer our deepest sympathy. It's time for you to find peace and move on from this place." We each took turns speaking, sharing our own words of comfort and encouragement. We expressed our gratitude for their presence and promised to remember their stories. As we spoke, the atmosphere began to shift. The cold drafts subsided, replaced by a gentle warmth that spread through the room. Suddenly, a bright light filled the space, and we heard a soft, melodic sound, like a choir of voices singing in harmony. It was beautiful and soothing, and we knew that the spirits were finally finding the peace they had longed for. The light faded, and the room returned to normal. The oppressive feeling that had plagued us was gone, replaced by a sense of calm and serenity. We knew that the spirits had moved on, and their pain finally eased. Evelyn smiled, her eyes filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. "They've found peace," she said. "You've done a wonderful thing here." Mia and I felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. We had faced our fears and uncovered the truth, bringing closure to a long-forgotten tragedy. Our apartment was no longer a place of unrest. It was a sanctuary where we connected with the past and found peace in the present. As we stood together, holding hands, we felt a renewed sense of hope and belonging. We knew that we would always remember the spirits who had touched our lives and the lessons we had learned from them. Our journey had been challenging and filled with fear, but it had also brought us closer together and given us a deeper appreciation for the history that surrounded us. In the days that followed, our apartment remained calm and peaceful. The strange noises and cold drafts were gone, replaced by a comforting silence. We created a small memorial in our living room, a place where we could honor the spirits who had found peace and remember the journey we had taken. Life returned to normal, but we were forever changed by the experience. We had faced the unknown and found strength in each other, uncovering the truth and bringing peace to the spirits of the past. And in doing so, we found a sense of belonging and purpose that would stay with us forever. Despite the calm that had settled over our apartment after Evelyn's ritual, Mia and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something left unresolved. The spirits might have found peace, but the echoes of their pain lingered in our minds. We decided to dig deeper, hoping to uncover the final truth that might set our hearts at ease. One evening, we revisited the items we had collected from the building, the photographs, letters, and personal artifacts that had once belonged to the hotel's guests. Among them was Margaret's diary, which had provided such crucial insights into the hotel's tragic past. We read through it again, searching for any details we might have missed. As I turned the pages, a small, folded piece of paper slipped out. It was an old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age and fragile to the touch. The headline read, "Crescent Hotel Tragedy, Fire Claims Multiple Lives." We had known about the fire, but this article provided more details than we had previously discovered. It listed the names of the victims, including Thomas, Edward, and Margaret. But there was one name that stood out: Henry Baker, Thomas's father. "I didn't know Thomas's father died in the fire," I said, showing the clipping to Mia. This might be the final piece of the puzzle. We decided to research Henry Baker further, hoping to understand his role in the tragedy. We returned to the Historical Society, where Mr. Harris helped us access old records and archives. What we found was heartbreaking. Henry Baker had been the hotel's maintenance manager, responsible for the safety and upkeep of the building. On the night of the fire, he had been working late, trying to fix a faulty boiler. According to witnesses, Henry had realized the danger and tried to evacuate the hotel, but he perished in the blaze along with his son, Thomas. "This explains so much," Mia said, her voice filled with sorrow. "Henry must have felt responsible for the fire and the deaths it caused. His spirit might still be trapped, burdened by guilt." We returned to our apartment, determined to help Henry find peace. We gathered the items that had belonged to him and Thomas and prepared for another ceremony. This time we focused on Henry, acknowledging his pain and the sacrifice he had made. That night, we lit candles and placed Henry's belongings around them. We spoke to him, telling him that we understood his suffering and that he wasn't to blame for the tragedy. We reassured him that his son Thomas had found peace and that it was time for him to do the same. As we spoke, the air grew colder and we felt a strong presence in the room. It was as if Henry's spirit was with us, listening to our words. We continued, expressing our gratitude for his efforts to save the hotel's guests and honoring his memory. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. We heard a soft, mournful sound, like a sigh of relief. The temperature began to rise and the oppressive feeling lifted. It was as if Henry's spirit was finally letting go of his guilt. Suddenly, a warm light filled the room, brighter and more comforting than anything we had experienced before. We felt a wave of peace and tranquility wash over us, and we knew that Henry had found the release he needed. The light faded, leaving behind a sense of calm and serenity. The strange noises and cold drafts that had plagued us were gone, replaced by a profound silence. We knew that the final piece of the puzzle had been put into place, and the spirits of the Crescent Hotel had all found peace. Mia and I stood together, holding hands and feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. We had faced the unknown, uncovered the truth, and brought closure to a long-forgotten tragedy. Our apartment was no longer haunted by the past. It was a place of peace and remembrance. In the days that followed, we created a small memorial for Henry alongside the one for Thomas and the other spirits. We wanted to honor their memories and the journey we had taken to help them find peace. Our lives returned to normal, but we were forever changed by the experience. We had learned the power of compassion and understanding, and we had found strength in each other. The spirits of the past had touched our lives, teaching us valuable lessons about love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. We will always remember them and the journey we shared. Our apartment became a sanctuary, a place where the past and present coexist in harmony. We had faced our fears, uncovered the truth, and brought peace to those who had suffered. And in doing so, we found a sense of belonging and purpose that would stay with us forever. Months had passed since the final ceremony that brought peace to the spirits of the Crescent Hotel. Mia and I had settled back into our routines, but our experiences continued to shape our lives in unexpected ways. The memories of our journey lingered, reminding us of the lessons we had learned and the strength we had discovered within ourselves. One evening, Mia came home with a surprise, a framed photograph she had found at a local antique shop. It was a black and white picture of the Crescent Hotel from decades ago, showing guests on the front porch and a staff member standing proudly by the entrance. "This is for our memorial," Mia said, smiling as she placed the photograph next to the others in our living room. A reminder of where it all began. I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for everything we had experienced. "We couldn't have done it without each other," I replied, reflecting on the challenges we had faced together. As we stood together, looking at the photographs and mementos, I realized how much we had grown. Our journey had started with fear and uncertainty, but it had led us to understanding and compassion. We had connected with the past and found a way to bring peace to those who had been forgotten. "We've come a long way," Mia said softly, breaking the silence. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "And I'm grateful to have shared this journey with you." In that moment, surrounded by the memories of the spirits we had helped, Mia and I found closure. Our apartment had become a place of healing and remembrance, a testament to the power of empathy and perseverance. As we moved forward with our lives, we carried the lessons of the Crescent Hotel with us. We understood the importance of honoring the past and finding strength in adversity. Our experience has taught us that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope and a way to bring light. And so, Mia and I continued to cherish our home, knowing that it was more than just a place to live. It was a sanctuary where the past and present intertwined. We had faced our fears, uncovered the truth, and brought peace to those who had suffered. And in doing so, we had found a deeper connection to ourselves and each other. As we looked toward the future, we knew that the spirits of the Crescent Hotel would always be a part of us. Their stories had become our own, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of compassion. Together, Mia and I stood in silence, grateful for the journey that had brought us here. And as we gazed at the photographs and mementos, we felt a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that we had made a difference in the lives of those who had once walked the halls of the Crescent Hotel.